believe the Sabbath is a day of rest. The tax man and the devil share the same address. I believe don't start if you're going to quit. I believe in keep your mouth shut and carry a big stick.
I believe that dogs are better than cats, and I believe that Jesus is coming back before she does. This is the Community Solutions Podcast. Jason Bradley, Andrew Richter, first podcast post-election 2018. Well, that's when you're getting it. It's still pre-election over on this side, but that's all right. How you doing, buddy?
I'm doing terrific, as always.
Good. This is a little removed now when you're hearing this, but just before this, we were doing a Facebook Live event talking all about what to do for the last 72 hours of your campaign. I've really enjoyed these Facebook Live events. What about you?
Yeah, I have. You'd think it was such a good idea. You'd think I'd have come up with it.
Yeah, no, that was... You?
I actually didn't. I got to give it to you on that one.
Yeah. You were a little trepidatious about it at first, but...
Only because, honestly, only because I just did not understand Facebook Live very well.
Yeah, that's all right.
I really just did not. So...
That's all right.
Now I get it.
You get it. Yeah.
And I, being a guy who spent 5 years on television, and having more people concentrate on what I look like than what I was saying. That's why I like the radio so much. I don't care that much to go on TV, so it was, but it's okay. It was a great thing. I think it was a great learning tool for us, and look forward to doing more of them, as well as counseling our friends who won. That
is true. I'm really excited to see how this all turns out. You all know by now. We're probably going to have to wait till next week's podcast to touch on that at all. But it's fun to be able to have that ability, because even when you were doing the TV show and I would come on all the time and bother you on the TV show, you had to take that away and you had to edit it and wait for cable access to
Thursday
to do
night,
its
6
thing.
o'clock. Yeah,
and here it's just like you click a button and you're on. It's amazing.
Yeah, I don't know that Facebook Live was around then. I mean,
no.
I don't think it was.
No, it was not.
No, it's a neat little tool. It's a neat thing, kind of like GoToMeeting almost, or something like that, where it's so much easier to do that. How hard is it to get everybody you want to talk to in one place, or you'll never get it organized. It'll never happen. So it's you got to do those things, and technology is something that's knocked down the barrier to so many things that you have to take advantage of that. And it's just great because if you got a bunch of people on there and somebody's asking a question that somebody else is thinking about, and somebody brings up another point, somebody brings up something we forgot or whatever, works out really well. So they were fun to do, and we are going to do more, not less, without a doubt.
Yeah.
So it's a nice thing that you discovered. For once, I can't take credit for something around here.
I'm not like Magellan or anything. I mean, other people who were doing it, and I figured it out.
You named a sea after yourself?
Yes, that's exactly what I did. Oh my goodness. I think I'm going to put a little note out. This is a voice from the future. Well, it'll be the past, I guess. It'll be a voice from the future when you read this. I'm gonna put a little reply out to you guys now from that podcast or the live event we just did. I think it's important that if you guys get a chance, you could do your own live event, or and just take a few minutes and talk to the people that you're trying to rally to get out to vote for you. So, I think we'll do that. But I foresee this as a great way to be able to get out to the masses, and look for those a lot more, is all I can say. I
agree, and I don't even know how to do it.
I could teach you in about 3 seconds. Even you could do this.
Nah, I'll just let you do it.
It's easier than programming a VCR.
Really?
Yeah.
Well, I still can't do that. All I do is hit play.
Your still flashes 12 all the time.
Oh, yeah.
Do they even make them with clocks anymore? I don't even know. They still make them.
The only
right?
thing they make, I think, is combos now.
Yeah, where it's a DVD, VHS, record your own adventure kind of thing.
Yep, I think so.
Wow. I suppose some of them have clocks. I don't know. I haven't even used a DVD player in a couple of years, I don't think.
Oh, really?
Well, not at home, I haven't.
Really? The wife and I have bought some TV show packages, and that's what we watch. A lot of DVDs of things that we aren't on Netflix or something
right.
like that, or were, and now they're not.
And that's the thing. I mean, I would probably watch my Rocky 1 through 4 DVDs over and over again.
Have you seen that Creed movie? Have you seen Creed?
I saw the first one. I have not seen the second one. Is that
just
out yet?
I think it comes out tomorrow. I think, but
you guys will all have seen it already.
I think.
I'm sure, out there.
I never saw Creed. I really wanted to, and I never.
Creed
saw
was really good. I can't wait to see Creed 2. Do you
Really?
know the premise?
Yeah, it's Apollo's son, right?
Right, but this new one, he's going to go up against Drago's son.
Oh,
yeah. So
the killers.
Yeah.
For Rocky IV.
Yeah,
Huh.
I'm excited. I can't wait to see it.
What I can't believe is that song from Rocky IV that we both knew. Remember that?
Yeah.
And,
No Way Out.
Yeah, and you started saying it, and I knew exactly what you were talking about.
That's only because the first 4 Rocky movies are like the best ever.
I liked the last one too. It was much better than I expected.
Absolutely.
I expected it to be cheesy and over nostalgic, and it really wasn't. It was a cool storyline. So, got to give it to Stallone, man. I'll tell you what, he can write and direct as well as anybody out there.
In the first movie, they didn't want to cast him. And
No,
he wasn't going to turn it over.
They wanted Burt Reynolds. They wanted Robert Redford, and they wouldn't sell him the script. I would have sold it to him. For what they were offering him for money, I would have sold it.
But he turned out to be a genius for not doing it.
Can you imagine? Look, love Burt Reynolds, but can you imagine him playing Rocky?
Yeah.
With his hairy chest and his... that's Smokey the Bandit.
Right.
He can't be Rocky.
It's Smokey the Bandit. It's Logan's Run. It's,
I know.
Any Which Way But Loose.
It's just...
I don't know.
Robert Redford, all I can think of is The Natural. And
Yeah.
I just can't... I couldn't picture him being Rocky, being a dumbbell, and being conversing with Mick. I mean, I just can't see that because so much, Rocky 3 was transformative because the Mick character dying.
Yeah.
So much of the heart was torn. I don't know how Stallone could have done it any other way because there was no reason for Apollo to train him if Mick was still there. And, I don't think, and of course you had Mr. T in the movie, you had Hulk Hogan in the movie.
Yeah.
It was much more a pop culture movie than the first couple. But the Mick and Rocky, the conversations they had. But hey, yo, Mick, I want my locker. You doing it? You just can't. I don't know. It's what can you say? They're iconic movies, even.
Absolutely.
And there's not. I got to say this too. There's not a whole lot of great sports movies that I can think of. I mean, my favorites would probably be Rocky, the original, or one of the first 4, if you just want to cluster them.
Yeah.
The series, The Natural, Major League. You have to put Hoosiers up there and anything like that. And I don't know what would be another one. What would be another good sports movie?
Oh, there's plenty of them. I
I don't think there's that many good ones.
Yeah.
What was the one with the Black Sox? 8 Men Out.
Yeah.
I would say that was another high one for me.
Yeah. I thought The Blind Side was very good.
Okay. I remember there was a movie when I was in high school called Necessary Roughness. I thought it starred the guy from Quantum Leap. I can't think of but my mom had a crush on him.
Bakula.
Scott Bakula or whatever.
Is it?
Yeah, Bakula.
Is that how it's pronounced?
BIA.
Is that it? I was called
Sam. It was Sam.
Yes, Sam.
Sam and Al.
Scott Bakula. I guess that's not
Maybe
it.
was
I don't know.
I thought there was an I in there.
There might be.
And Sinbad, he was in it. He had a very funny part in there. But yeah, I don't think there's that many. There was a great sports movie too about a kicker that was a horse. It was called Gus.
Huh.
Yeah, Gus was the kicker.
Okay.
And so he kicked. Don Knotts was in the movie. Played one of the coaches. So
Yeah.
But-
As much as I'm not really a fan of like horse racing, Seabiscuit was pretty good.
okay, Hot to Trot maybe.
Hot to
John
Trot.
Candy, the talking horse.
I don't think that's
Hold on, before we get into this, Google some sports movies.
what. All right, the election hasn't really happened yet. We got a lot to do.
Yeah, but
we got to get through this podcast.
But I got to see more sports movies.
Yeah. I never saw Raging Bull.
Oh, okay, I
that,
did.
Is that good?
Yeah.
Moneyball, obviously.
Okay.
Bull
Durham.
Like
How
Beckham,
about
I never watched
Field
that.
of Dreams?
Oh yeah. Remember the Titans? That was good.
Okay, I don't know if I saw that.
Invincible was good with Mark Wahlberg about the Eagles.
I never saw that.
That was good.
Rudy. How about Rudy?
Yeah. Does Talladega Nights really count? I guess it's a sports movie.
Yeah, I wouldn't count Jerry Maguire or Caddyshack either.
Well, that's
$1 Million
a golf
Baby.
Dodgeball.
I like that. Oh, I know the one I was thinking of. Bad News Bears. That was the original.
Yeah.
With Walter Matthau.
Okay. Yeah.
Pride of the Yankees. How can you not? See, I don't consider Karate Kid a sports movie.
No, I mean it is. He goes to a karate tournament.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Mighty Ducks.
Yeah.
White guys can't wrestle. Jump.
Happy Gilmore really isn't a sports movie, I guess, but I don't know.
Anyway, Longest Yard, maybe the original. Not the one with Adam Snadler in it. Look, I got Space Jam coming up on mine.
Burt Reynolds is in both of those.
That's
Longest
right.
Yards. Yes.
Yep. Miracle, maybe that's a good one too.
Maybe.
Okay. Anyway, on to business.
Yes. On to business.
Business always has to interrupt.
Yeah. Here we are. I mean, we're doing this for your sake so that you can decompress a little bit because it's been a long election season. You're getting this now one day after the election, and you're probably sick and tired of hearing about elections and all that. We were going to talk about something in Woodbury. Maybe we'll talk about that in a week or two with some odd pre-election shenanigans out there. But you know what? It's just good to take it kind of easy for a week, and just kind of but that's all we're going to give you is about a week. Take a breath of fresh air, and we're not even really going to give you a week because we're going to get into something we alluded to in the song at the beginning, talking about the tax man and the devil share the same address. Well, we're going to talk all about the process of figuring out those taxes for you, your property taxes, anyways, from the city, and I guess the county kind of works the same way, where they come up with a budget, and we've talked about the budgeting process before, but we're going to talk to you a little more in depth about some solutions around budgeting.
We are community solutions.
That's right.
We don't just identify problems; we talk about them.
Because that's just complaining, and we're not about complaining. Oh, don't get me wrong. I mean, we do a little bit of that because it's fun.
I do a lot of it,
But in the end of the day, if you don't have the solutions to be able to put into place to make something better, you are really just complaining. And so we always kind of, put some thought into it, and we do our homework and try to come up with what we feel would be the best possible solution. And it's not always the same everywhere, Andrew. No. Nowhere is a cookie cutter of another place, but there are some, I think, universal truths, and I think we're going to talk about some of those in this podcast.
Yeah, if we become cookie cutters, then we're no better than the people we complain about.
That's correct.
We want cookie cutter everything everywhere.
That's right.
And I think when it comes to, questions that I know that I get asked a lot, and I'm sure you do too, are, why does government never shrink? Why does government always get bigger, always get, why is it so hard to reduce the size of government? And I think one of the problems, and this is one of the problems, and you could apply this to said government, is how they arrive at financial decisions, or how financial decisions are presented to them.
Yes.
Let me give you an example. Okay, now I'm going to use the state of Minnesota just as a starting point.
Sounds good.
Because what we're going to talk about today is basically changes we'd make to the budgeting process at the local level, but this applies everywhere. State of Minnesota uses what's called baseline budgeting. That's pretty much used everywhere. Now let's explain, Jay, what a baseline budget means.
Okay. Here's a pretty standard definition, if you will. Baseline budgeting is an accounting method the United States federal government uses to develop a budget for future years. Baseline budgeting uses, and by the way, not only the federal government uses it, so does your state, so does your county, your schools, your cities. Baseline budgeting, colleges even use this, so we'll get into that later. Baseline budgeting uses current spending levels as the baseline for establishing future funding requirements and assumes future budgets will equal the current budget times the inflation rate times the population growth rate. Twice a year, generally, and this gets into some different stuff with the federal government specifically, but that really explains it. You take and you baseline yourself off of the last year, and then you figure out how much you want government to grow, and that's your new number.
Right. And so, for example, and I'll use the state as an example because I kind of know a little bit more about that than the feds. But the feds, I'll give you an example, will take something like Social Security payouts, and they'll budget an inflationary payout over, say, a year, or they do theirs on a yearly basis.
Yes.
State of Minnesota does it on a 2-year basis. But basically, the state of Minnesota, for example, is got a formula to figure out spending on pretty much everything. I mean,
yes.
Local government aid has one. Education has one. And basically, they take, say it's $10 billion, okay, for whatever. Then the next year, it's projected to be every drop of that $10 billion plus more.
Yes.
And usually it's some sort of percentage, or like you said, some sort of formula that some tax auditor comes up with.
Right.
And they have to make it. Any drop less than that, the state of Minnesota's government considers that a cut. Now, we all know that that's BS.
Yeah.
And we'll get to why in a second here. But so they'll budget $10.3 billion for year one, $10.7 billion for year two. And there's your baseline budget.
Yes.
Okay, now your local government will do the same thing. The police department got $3 million in 2018. So for 2019, they're going to start at $3 million.
Yes.
And add to it.
Okay. And it's based on, like we said, inflation, but also how much more do they want to spend?
Or projected tax base growth at the local level or something like that. The state and federal government kind of do that, although they collect so much in taxes, I think it's a lot harder to do that. So that is basically a baseline budget. Now, you might sit here and go, well, what's wrong with that? Why doesn't that work? If we've used that for 100 years, why change it? Well, here's the problem. If you start at every little nickel, I mean, think about it like this. You went in your family went grocery shopping and you spent $100. Okay, let's just okay. The next time you go grocery shopping, you're projected to spend $103. The next time you're projected to spend $110. The next time you're projected, well, what if you still only have $100?
Right.
I mean, you've got a problem there. So there's, and if you are projected to spend $110 and only spend $107, the government folks call that a $3 cut.
Yes.
So you can
imagine that.
So when you hear the state's cutting this, the state's cutting that, you got to understand again, if we had an honest media that would report this accurately, and there's a few people who try to do that. The guy Tom Hauser over at Channel 5 is probably the closest thing we have to a honest mainstream reporter in Minnesota.
Yeah.
He's all right. I mean, some things he says I don't care for.
But again, I mean, this is all like state level stuff. It's
True.
not, you're not going to find him talking about local budgets.
Right. But like we mentioned, the same sort of principles kind of apply. Like we said, so you'll get $3 million for the police. The police think that the next year they're entitled to all $3 million, every single penny, every, everything that they got, plus something else.
Okay.
And that's where the budget starts. So the budget starts, say, at $3.2 million in their minds. And if they get 3.15, even though it's more than the previous year, in their minds, that's a cut. Now, that's problem number one.
Right.
That is why the size of government never seems to go down. In fact, our state government, I'll just use the state because I happen to know this, spending is up 25% just since 2011. So there's no cuts that have been made anywhere at the state level, thanks largely to Governor Goofballs. But spending went up under Governor Ventura, it went up under Governor Pawlenty, it went up under Arnie Carlson. It's never gone down. It's a total myth.
No,
because people don't understand what it cut. They don't understand the budget process.
Well, and this is how it worked. I mean, I remember I started a group when I was in college at St. Scholastica up in Duluth. And I didn't understand. I had a budget to work with. And they didn't – it was explained to me this way. You have X amount of dollars, and you need to spend every one of those dollars this year if you want to get that money next year.
Right. Exactly.
That's a huge problem.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, what if I only need $100 this year? What if I need $1,000 next year? What if I only need, $500 the year after that? I mean, it doesn't work like that. You have to scratch and claw for every dollar that you can get, and you have to spend it, or else you're not going to be able to justify it next year.
Why did you get it? Why did we give you this money if you didn't spend it?
Right.
I can tell this story now that I don't work for Uniforms Unlimited anymore.
Mm-hmm.
But December was a month you'd get a call from a police chief.
Yeah.
Oh, my God, I got $5,000 I have to spend. I need this and this and this and this and this. And it's kind of like, I wanted so badly to say, why don't you just not spend it? But we all know why. Because they have to go in the next year and make the case.
Not their fault.
It isn't, but again, they're encouraged to spend every nickel. They almost have to, or like you said, they can't justify the money going in. So, the whole thing is, I remember, this was years back, I sat in a meeting in the city of Crystal.
Mm-hmm.
The first budget meeting of the year. This is from the old council.
Yes.
I'm going way back. And it was the start of the budget talks. And every department head was there. Stephanie wasn't the police chief yet.
Okay.
It was the guy before. I can't think of his name.
Bannon, John.
O'Bannon or something like that.
Something like that, yeah.
Bannock?
John Bannock.
Yeah. And Patrick Peters was there. John Sutter was the city planner then. And Charlie Hansen, the finance guy, and the lady from Park and Rec who retired. And pretty much none of them are there anymore. The public works guy, there was like 6 of them. Somebody was there from administration, and then Ann and the council. So it was a big work session. They all basically had to, one by one, talk about how, we just can't possibly squeeze any dollar more than we currently are right now. I mean, they know how to play the game.
Oh,
to
yeah.
be fair. And to be fair, I can't blame the department heads. Their job is to carry out their duties with the resources that they have. If they want to fight for more, that's their prerogative. It's no different than me walking into my bosses and fighting for a raise.
Yep.
It's no different than that. Although, like the police have a union, they have somebody do that for them. But anyhow, and I just God, what the blankety blank. I mean, it was tough to sit there and listen to.
Yeah.
And basically the budget handout, which at that time was not available online. You couldn't get their packet that the council was. I actually ripped one off. I don't know that anybody saw me take one. But you couldn't. Of course I stole it. It was there. Of course I took it. But you had to. But you couldn't look at. You could look at the agenda, but you couldn't look at their packet of what they were seeing. The 50 pages or whatever. You can now, of course,
Yes.
with the new council. But
Right. Back then it was hush, hush, hush.
Yeah,
no
it was-
transparency.
right. I mean,
yeah.
if you wanted it, you had to.
Right.
I don't know how you could.
You pull a Freedom of Information Act and wait
Probably.
till
Yeah, you get it after
Yeah.
everybody's reelected, then you get it. Anyhow, and basically the whole premise was they had one baseline after another. It went back like I don't know, maybe 4 years at the time in this handout.
Yeah.
It was baseline this, and nothing was reduced. Nothing was ever. Now, it didn't go up by huge margins. I'll give them that. But and they were talking, and then the council had a work session a couple weeks later, and were claiming that they'd made millions of dollars in cuts and blah blah. And I'm going, what the hell have you cut? You haven't cut a damn thing. There's no less money being spent anywhere. What the hell are you talking about?
No.
But what they
not.
were talking about was they were cutting the rate of growth. Instead of giving everybody a 3% more, they gave everybody 2.5%. Well, that was a 0.5% cut. They were playing the same games, and I'm generalizing here because I don't remember the specifics. I don't even remember what year this was. Renee was still the mayor, but I don't remember anything specific. So that's the kind of shenanigans we're talking about here of why these budgets never go down and all that. Now, Jay, we're Community Solutions.
Yes. Yes, we are.
What is the alternative? And I'll tell you another problem with this. Let me.
Okay, you do that before I
Another
jump in.
problem is what these do. And I can't blame municipalities for this completely because state law plays a role in this. But they figure out how much money they want to spend.
Right.
Then they figure out how they're going to get it.
Exactly.
And that's another issue. It's like, okay, I need to spend $3,000 this month, so I present my boss with a bill at work. How does that go over? Not too well.
No.
So that's a secondary problem to that. But part of that is state law making them pass a preliminary levy and all that.
Right.
And basically holding them to a different standard that the state holds themselves,
Yes.
which is another problem. So, but like I said, we're Community Solutions, Jay.
Yes.
So how do we fix baseline budgeting, or
Well,
do we fix it?
There is another alternative out
Yes.
there. Other than baseline budgeting, you do what's called zero-based budgeting. This originated back in the 1970s, and many businesses will budget and plan out things to maintain financials. I'm reading this, but this is, again, a good definition.
This isn't your brilliance?
In the past, businesses would only look at specific things and would assume that everything is already in place and does not need to be double-checked. However, in zero-based budgeting, everything that is to be budgeted needs to be approved. Since zero-based budgeting requires an approval for budgeting, this means that budgets are started from a zero base with a fresh decision on everything being made every year. Yes.
So, in other words, we're not starting at what you got last year. We're doing
Right.
priority number 1, priority number 2.
Yep.
Yeah.
And so each new period in this instance with government, it would be every year they would have to come up with all of their expenses and be able to justify them. Now, I mean, we're not talking about, and I know we've talked about this in the past. I mean, we don't want the police to have to justify every pair of handcuffs they buy.
Yeah.
We don't want the city clerk to have to justify every box of paper clips. That's, but zero-based budgeting is more than that. It's not micromanaging necessarily to a T, but it's like having to come up with from zero a number. It's like, well, I know I'm going to need I'm going to need XYZ this year. And so I'm going to have to put that in the budget versus, hey, I know that, every year we're just going to try and get the same amount and then figure out,
Well, and it also, if everybody gets, there's a great saying, if everything's a priority, nothing's a priority.
Right.
So if every single arm of government, everything starts at where they got last year, how do you ever reduce anything? It's impossible.
Mm-hmm.
So how do you, if you're a city, you got to prioritize, not 100% in this order, close to it though. You got to start with public safety.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, you're mandated to do that by state government. Roads, water, sewer, and parks.
Employees, administration.
Right. Administration, I mean, that's kind of comes with the territory.
Yeah.
But you've got to kind of prioritize those things, and everything else is a want, not a need.
Right.
So you got to fund those needs. Once the needs are funded, then you fund the wants, if there are any.
Yeah.
And there may not be.
Well, they always want something.
Yeah, well, they always want something. But, I mean, the point being that if you're ever going to have reform of how we do something, the entire budget process has to be scrapped.
Right.
It's kind of like if you make a bad law,
mm-hmm.
you don't want to repeal a third of it or a quarter of it.
Right.
You want to repeal all of it.
Yeah.
And so the same thing applies here. The whole way they go about, it's kind of like this. Think of it in your home. There are certain expenses that stay the same, certain expenses you can control, certain expenses that are variables. Your electric bill might change every month. You can use less. You can blah, blah, blah. You might pay off something. You might, whatever. Government's got to start using those same principles that we use in the private sector. They've got to start. Everything can't be so stagnant, and it also has to apply to the understanding of, look, the city government does not exist so X amount of people can have work. Which is another problem too. It's not a jobs program, and you're never going to reduce that if everybody starts with whatever they got last year.
Mm-hmm.
How does that work?
You can never spend less at that when you do budgeting like that.
It will never happen, ever.
No.
Not in a million years. I'll tell you another part of this is, and state law is going to have to change for this to really happen, is they've got to start with the revenue, not with the spending.
Yes.
Because it can't start with we've decided we're going to spend $10 million this year. Now it's up to us to go figure out how to get it.
Yeah.
Instead of, okay, we have 9.5,
mm-hmm.
and that's what we can spend.
Yeah.
So it's got to be backwards. Now, you'd have to change a whole lot of things for that to happen at a local level, because the county is the tax collector. The property tax system is screwed up here in Minnesota and needs tons of reform. We could do a whole show on that. But ultimately, that zero-based budgeting, everybody starts with nothing, and we start filling it in. Public safety first. You want to go roads second, water and sewer third, parks that the city has to maintain fourth, whatever else is after that. And guess what? If there's no money left, then there's no money left.
Right.
So, that's how you're going to rid yourself of some of these problems. But if you start with the spending and you start with the mentality that the budget starts at every cent I got last year, we're dead in the water when it comes to reducing 5 cents out of government.
Absolutely. I mean, there's no way to go backward.
Yeah, and you mentioned, not wanting to micromanage departments. I mean, and I think that's an important point, too. It's another reform that city's council's job is to figure out the budget.
Yeah.
And make overall policy. It's not to do anything else. Like you talked about every pair of handcuffs. I have seen that.
Mm-hmm.
Where, okay, well, we need $500 for handcuffs, and we need $600 for new radios. I mean, it's like, okay,
Right.
wait a minute.
And that's what baseline budgeting gets you.
Yeah, it
because
does.
you're starting with last year, what you spent, and everything else you want, you have to make a case for.
Right. Instead of saying, okay, look, we'll give you X, you figure out. Let the
Right.
department head figure out their own thing. We're not going to sit here and approve a line item of, a new nightstick for Officer Fife. Okay, that's not. If you think that's important, you figure out how to get it.
Yeah.
But I think that's another thing. I think too many councils, want to go line by line. That sounds great, but how many people on the city council are qualified to be a police chief or a fire chief or how many of them run departments anywhere? I mean, you hire these people to do that,
Yes.
and you have to let them do their jobs. And if they don't, and you make the standards, you make the guidelines, the city manager's the one who goes and enforces that. If they don't, that's cause to get rid of the city manager. You make policy and you figure out the budget. You don't micromanage it line by line. That's just that's what a lot of these meetings, though. That's what it's taken up. They argue about $500 here and $1,000 there, but the bigger picture of how the budget's being done in the first place is kind of what's get lost in those meetings.
Yeah.
So it's silly.
It is silly.
It's silly. Now, if you want to go up to the state level, baseline, that's where baseline budgeting is even worse because you build in these things for gazillions of dollars.
Oh.
And no matter
your
what,
departments are so huge. You think about something like the Minnesota Pollution Control Agency, the Met
DNR,
Council, the DNR, the Department
MnDOT,
of Transportation,
Education Department.
And all of the employees and all.
Think
of
about
the
a 1 or 2%
capital
1 or 2%
costs.
increase. How much money is that?
I need a new dump truck. It's not a new dump truck at the state level. It's like a fleet of dump trucks. Oh, no wonder taxes are so high.
No wonder why the spending never, ever, ever. Not only doesn't it decrease, but it doesn't even. The decrease of the increase isn't very much, And I'll tell you, it's worse during good times.
Yeah, exactly.
Because if there's a surplus, which means we were overtaxed.
Mm-hmm.
We always find it funny how government thinks a surplus is theirs. If I went to the grocery store and my bill was $68 and I gave $80 to the guy behind the counter, can that guy behind the counter go, you know what, that's a $12 surplus, and I got a few things that I want to fund. I got a new freezer I want to buy or something. I'm gonna put that. I'm gonna keep that change and put that away. Would that ever be allowed?
No.
So why does government think that the surplus is theirs to divvy up?
Right.
But they do. If there's a surplus, let me tell you something. The department heads and all that, they are there like me at a pizza buffet. They are all over how all of a sudden, even though last year they could get away without A, B, and C, now there's no way that they can. So, it's pathetic to watch. And unfortunately, I spend way too much time watching things like this.
Yeah.
But it's terrible. It's god-awful.
Yeah, or even if they do give you your money back, I'm kind of like, wait a second. You're giving me my money back. How about you just not take it in the first place? I could have used it 3 months ago.
I'll tell you the worst part, too. The worst part is then they want credit for giving it back.
Right. Oh, that's exactly it. They want to look all sanctimonious, like, look at this good deed we're doing. No, if you were doing a good deed, you'd reduce my taxes. I wouldn't have had to give this money to you in the first place if you had been doing your job the right way.
Yeah, so why do a one-time give back too? That doesn't make sense either. But that's what that's what I go back to. I'm trying to think of Remember when we got the a rebate on something? Oh, I think Jesse Ventura was the governor. I'm going back quite a few years.
Yeah, no, he did.
2000-ish.
There was a surplus, and he sent taxpayers a check back out of that.
He
surplus.
in the legislature.
Yep.
Yeah, there was. I think we had a Republican House and a Democratic Senate, if I remember, with him as the governor. At least his first 2 years. Maybe it wasn't that way afterward, but yeah. So there was some sort of money back, but like you said, the permanent changes in the taxes or the tax codes weren't there. So that was kind of, I mean, I enjoyed my check, which wasn't that much money, but
like I said, I could have used it 3 months earlier.
yeah, that's true. Probably.
Sure. But so we have this problem. I mean, with and don't get me wrong. I mean, it's not easy business to figure out a budget that's millions upon millions of dollars. And I'm talking like in a city level here. Obviously, the state spends way more than that, and so Hennepin County even spends way more than that. So it could be millions. It could be upwards of $1 billion if you're talking county level. It's a big job, and to figure that out accurately and to be able to forecast what you're going to need. I mean, I understand this, and I'm not castigating anybody for having to make sure that they have something put away in case there's an emergency or whatever. But that's not what we're doing, Andrew. And this whole idea of, well, we just gotta we gotta keep on keeping on. Tax the same amount plus some, versus kind of making people figure things out. And I think if we went to a zero-based budgeting approach, it would allow us more leeway to be able to figure out how much we actually need to put away for replacing water sewer systems, for building a new police station down the line, because they would understand the costs of that, and it would adjust a little bit, over time with inflation. But
plus, here's the thing with baseline budgeting: if you're always using that, none of that money from the previous year can be spent on anything else.
Right.
So if you want to, you have to go out and get new money to do that. So if you want to set money aside, like you said, for a project in the future, where maybe you don't want to borrow, you don't want to pay interest on, like we've talked about cities trying to reduce their debt or even become debt free, if that can happen, or as debt free as possible. Just,
right.
How do you do that if you use baseline budgeting? You have to go out and get more.
Yeah, you're not allowed to take money out of one fund and put it in another fund, because and we've explained this before. When all the revenue comes in, they break it up into a number of funds. A bunch of money goes in the general fund that can kind of be used for whatever. But then you've got your water fund, you've got a street light fund, you've got a roads fund.
They can be moved under some circumstances.
Yes.
They actually, sometimes cities borrow from one fund and then pay it back plus interest.
Ever heard of?
I have seen that.
Big corporations do the same thing,
right? I think here's the it's funny. My position on that is kind of weird because I like dedicated funds. I like knowing that if you're going to have franchise fees in a city, I want to know exactly what that's going towards.
Right.
I don't want that being thrown in the general fund and being used to supplement something because you don't want to raise property taxes. At the same time, I think cities have to have some flexibility to move money around. I mean, if I've saved up all my money for new golf clubs and I got my golf club fund and my water heater blows up,
don't buy the golf clubs.
Right. I have to take money from my golf club fund, or I have to borrow, put it on my credit card. Maybe I don't want to do that.
Right.
Maybe golf clubs can wait till next year. Okay, city, same thing. Maybe your new radios can wait till next year.
Absolutely.
So, on the one hand, I like the dedicated funds. On the other hand, I see circumstances in which, look, we've got a building deteriorating, or the previous council didn't put cash aside for this thing, and we don't want to have to take out a bond. I can see where that money can be better served somewhere else. And every council is going to have a little different idea. I mean, if the council in Crystal was using the same principles now that we were 7 or 8 years ago, things would be much worse right now. We'd have millions of dollars in bonds.
Yep.
But because they changed the way, I don't think they use zero-based budgeting, but I know that they've done a lot of other things, from 2-year budget to putting money aside for things and using that major building replacement fund. They have to be able to change policy and have, but at the same time, I do like the dedicated funds, because if it all gets thrown in the general fund, then you have no idea where that tax dollars are going.
Right. No, I think you need to. You need to, especially like if you're saving to fix some roads, or you're saving to build a new city building, whether that's a police station or a city hall or whatever. You have to be able to put away money for that if you do not want to pay for all of it in bonding or something like that. And so you've got to have those different funds to say that everything is locked down. I mean, you don't want to like, oh, now we can't build a new city hall because we took all of that and put it into, our replacing our water system. You got to plan for that too. And that's, I think, it. I mean, you have to be a good planner when you're looking at the total financial health of a city.
Well, you got to have short-term goals and long-term goals. You've got a short-term goal, which is your budget, your 2 years or whatever it is. You got to have a 5-year plan, a 10-year plan. You got to know the shape of the buildings that you have. Yeah. You got to know how many police cars are we going to need in 10 years or 5 years or whatever. And look, some cities know that stuff and still, we'll just bond when the time comes or whatever. I mean, that's what we did last time. So we'll just, and by the way, there are state laws around that. A lot of people don't know this, but municipalities cannot just bond and bond and bond. They are limited to a percentage. I don't remember what, but a percentage of their tax base is all they can have in debt. They can't. They're not the federal government. They can't just borrow from the Chinese until the year 2458.
Right.
They have to. They have some. It's Minnesota State Statutes 476. I don't remember the percentage, but it's not like they can bond $100 billion. They can't do that. So you're going to have some planning.
Yeah.
And you have to say no to some things.
Well, and that's why, running a city can be a lot like running a home. In buying a home, you have a certain debt-to-income ratio that they look at before you take out any debt to buy a home. A lot of times cars, it's the same kind of thing. So why, when we're dealing with smaller amounts of money where we don't have an endless amount we can't just create wealth out of thin air. We can't print our own money. We can't.
That's a good thing, though.
That is a very good thing. It gets people to think about things with a certain financial responsibility, which, coming out of usually the private sector into still being in the private sector, but a part-time governing position at a city, maybe a full-time governing position with a county or a part-time with a school. You bring in the common sense that you might use through your financial principles at home. I think people forget that by the time, it seems like a lot of them forget it, though, at the local level, too. I mean, theoretically, they should have those kinds of skills when they get on a city council, county commission.
Jane, you know what happens when you speak in theory, don't you?
Yeah.
That theory just don't hold no water. Pardon my grammar, but it just don't. So, here's the bottom line. We need zero-based budgeting. We need a new approach. We need some state laws to change and some guidelines to change. I know we're coming up on the truth and taxation hearings in December. I still encourage people. Oh, excuse me. Long day. Encourage people to attend those and educate yourself on the budget, where your money's going, where it's coming from. You can make small reforms along the way, too. That's not impossible to do. So keep things like that in mind, too, that, small victories can lead to big ones down the road.
Right. And, Maybe we should just take a couple of minutes. We have a couple of minutes here. Why don't we?
Okay.
Because it was a long time ago, and you still should go back and listen to that podcast. And I'll grab the number here. When we did the talk about the budget process and compared budgets with comprehensive annual financial reports. Why don't we just briefly go over that? Because we are coming into that season. Your city councils, your county, your school boards have been working on budgets since summer.
Yeah, probably since early August.
Right. And so they had to come up with a preliminary levy. Let's talk about that for a little bit so that people understand how they can get into that process and give feedback to their government.
August is usually the busiest month. By September 30th, every municipality needs to file what's called a preliminary budget. Even if you have a 2-year budget, you have to file a levy every year. You can pass a budget amendment, which is a little different, just like the state does. But basically, they present to the county a preliminary levy by September 30th. Now, most municipalities will do this earlier in September rather than later. Maybe the meeting after Labor Day, typically. Maybe the meeting, but usually it's somewhere around there.
Yeah.
And then that comes to you in November. November, you get your preliminary tax statement, property tax. And what the councils will do then, or the county commissioners or whoever, is use that to finalize their December levy. Now, the December levy cannot go above the September levy, although they can reduce it. Typically, they reduce it 0.000027% and call it a cut.
Right.
But usually the December one is pretty much reflective of the September one. That's when the levy is finalized. State law mandates that they have a public hearing for that. Of course, they hold it the very night they're going to vote on it, which means they've already pretty much decided. You can come and complain, but, it's probably not going to lead to much. And then that will be, whatever they pass, will be on your statement in March that you will get in the mail, which will be your actual property taxes for that year.
Right.
The payments are doled out on May 15th and October 15th for people who escrow and don't actually pay them, where it's built into your mortgage payment. You might not notice it as much as if you were like me and actually paid it. Or maybe you own your home outright, and you'd have to pay those on May 15th and October 15th. So it's a whole process from August to March almost of where, there's things going on and changes being made, things you need to know about.
So if you want to get involved in that process, you have to do it before the Truth and Taxation meeting.
Yeah, I mean, even in the summer.
Yeah.
I mean, when they're just talking about the budget.
But it's not too late. I mean, do it now.
Right. Do it now. Get to the chopper. Yep.
Episode 23, we talked about the budget process.
Wow.
I knew it was way back there.
Back.
I think we did that one on location, if I remember right. So,
really?
Yeah. I'll have to maybe listen back to that one and see.
Well, always good to – those podcasts are timeless.
Absolutely.
Those podcasts about today's podcast is timeless. We could have given this talk 10 years ago.
Yeah.
And the same issues are still going on. So, yeah, budget process, all effed up around here. Some changes can be made that aren't that much. Some changes are going to take some work.
Yeah.
But the utopia is the zero-based budgeting without the 800-pound gorilla of the state telling us to get out the spending side, which they have to do. I mean, it's not really completely their fault. They have to comply with that. So without that, with zero-based budgeting, then we're going to see some real moving and shaking, I think, at the municipal level.
I think, we can. Obviously, it takes getting people into office that have a kind of financial head about them, to be able to want to spend less. I mean, we could go zero-based budgeting and still keep increasing spending every year.
Sure.
It's going to take having people around that are dedicated to not just putting money to everything that comes forward, not getting involved in programs where it causes them to spend more employee hours on something than they need to, and to put in like infrastructure and capital costs into things. I guess like Minnesota Green Step Cities, where you're paying for infrastructure, you're paying capital costs on things, you're spending employee hours on things that you could pick the good and leave the bad, and
there you have the facts of life. Oh, sorry. Do you want me to sing? Okay.
Oh, my goodness.
It's getting late.
That's all right. But so I guess what we're looking for when it gets down to it, some people to be watchdogs at the local level and make sure that you hold their feet to the fire when it comes to financial accountability, to propose these new solutions like zero-based budgeting. But they're probably not going to just listen to you, so you might as well just do it. And get on an advisory commission, start getting your feet wet in local government. I mean, it does us no good to talk about elections right now. We just got done with an election, but you know what we can do? If we're not elected anything, we can get on an advisory commission and advise our city councils, our county boards, our school boards on what we think is right. And maybe we'll like it enough that we'll want to run for office. And let me just say this now, that the next election cycle for you, it's got to start way before July of 2020, or if you're in an odd-year election city or school district, way before July of next year. If you have elections next year, you really need to be thinking about it now so that you can hit the ground with your feet running in January. And for 2020, same thing, a year from now. Can't be waiting, because you got to put together a winning strategy, and it takes time. It takes doing your homework. It takes having that knowledge base to work from. And you can't just whip it together and hope that it's going to be good. But we need dedicated people like our friends that we helped this year, and we can't just sit back on our laurels and wait for somebody else to do it. It's not happening. Things are getting worse. So we need you. We really need 2% of you to stand up and say, I've had enough. That's it. But you can't be looking to the right or to the left or behind you or in front of you for that person to stand up. You got to be the person to stand up. And make a little bit of a sacrifice for your state, your city, your country, your county. It's up to you. Get to City Hall, fill out an application, get on a commission. You got questions about that, or you see weird things happening in your community? Email us, commsolutionsmn@gmail.com. That's commsolutionsmn@gmail.com, and we would love to work with you to be able to get that in motion for you, to make you feel comfortable with the process, to teach you everything we know. So, with that, it's time. It is. Let me say this. I know, I'm wrapping this up, but 2 years from now, whoever wins gets to decide how things shake out when they restructure everything, when they redistrict. You want to be the side that decides how they redistrict, or do you want to be told how you're going to be redistricted?
The side that decides? I want to be the side that decides.
Yeah? Well,
can't say that quickly.
If you agree with Andrew and you want to be on the side that decides, you need to do something about it now. It starts now. Not in a year, not in 2 years. It starts now. Because we've done our part, Minnesota.
Do it now.
Yes, do it. Do it. We love you, Minnesota, but it's your turn to get to work.
Take my life, caught a break between the lines. Don't let me